Hey guys, it's Andrew and welcome back. This episode is going to be a very special one because we're going to be speaking to some lecturers at UCL Geography. So why don't you follow me and we're going to find out about their research interests.
And for me, at the age of 8, I decided I was going to be a scientist. No idea which one, but that was my passion, and that's actually carried me through that understanding of the world, that how you actually really get to the grips of some data that tells you something more about how the world is changing. My current passion is trying to understand the impacts of humans on the planet, because it's absolutely huge. We make enough concrete to cover the world in 2 millimeters of concrete. We actually produce 350 million tons of plastic per year, which are ending up in all the oceans and our drinking water. So we have this huge impact, and it's called the Anthropocene. We are now in a new geological era created by us.
While some geographical research focuses on the large-scale impacts of human behaviours on this planet over long periods of time, other research engages with more contemporary and local scales, including everyday lived experiences.
So as part of our research project examining local community experiences of and responses to displacement, we're doing research in 9 local communities in the Middle East, in Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. And this includes, for example, research in Badawi refugee camp in North Lebanon, which has been home to refugees from Palestine since the 1950s and is now also home to refugees from Syria and has been since 2011. So here we have an example of established refugees being the hosts to newly arrived refugees, and it provides a really important reminder that refugees are not only supported by international humanitarian organisations, but that actually most people around the world survive thanks to the interactions that take place on the local level in communities and in camp contexts.
There are so many ways to represent research data and to tell a particular kind of story about human behaviour, spatial patterns, or expressions of identity and belonging.
Hi, I'm Dr. James Cheshire. I'm an Associate Professor in Quantitative Human Geography. Really it means I'm interested in data, I'm interested in numbers, I'm interested in statistics, and I'm interested in how we can take these to create new and interesting insights into the population, into the way that we behave, what it means to engage on social media. These are all kinds of data that get regularly collected, and they're being collected in ever greater volumes thanks to smartphone technology, thanks to credit and debit card transactions. And the secret to unlocking a lot of this stuff is through maps. You know, maps offer us a window into these data sets, and it's really within the power of geography and geographers to take that data, put it on a map, and then interpret it in a more interesting and informed way.
Growing up as a British-born South Asian in London, in a time when it was a struggle. So one of the things that has really interested me is the emergence of various forms of popular culture and spaces as well, where forms of British Asian popular culture emerged, and thus British-born South Asians felt like they could belong in society. I've done research, for example, on British Asian dance music, and trying to think about the music as forms of expression that testify to this experience of being both British but also South Asian.
Some research is carried out across a large number of field sites for comparative purposes or to address policy concerns.
Hi, my name's Peter. I do research on the governance of marine protected areas. We have 50 case studies in 24 different countries around the world. And what we do with each one of those marine protected areas is go in and try and get an understanding of the different governance approaches that are employed within that marine protected area, the approaches that seem to be effective in addressing conflicts and achieving conservation objectives, whilst at the same time promote equity, promote the fair sharing of costs and benefits from that. This research has been sponsored by the United Nations Environment Programme, and we're just about to publish guidance on how to combine different governance approaches for practitioners and policymakers around the world.
From marine protected areas to informal settlements in Kenya, the locations of geographical research are hugely diverse, as are the methods of research across physical and human geography.
My name is TATIANA, and my work is situated at the nexus of development, economic and urban geography. I bring an ethnographic approach, and an ethnographic approach in research is a way of trying to understand someone else's perspective and point of view through their own language, their own belief systems, their own narratives. So that's an important part of my research, is to try to better understand people's perspectives and their realities through their voices and their claims. I'm really interested in how people make a living in precarious urban environments, and I've been doing a lot of research in Kenya. And when I say make a living, it means recognizing that the nature and conditions of work in cities and in everyday life have been changing dramatically across the global north and the global south. What does it mean to get a job when there are no jobs to be found?
I'm Helen BENNION, and I'm Professor of Environmental Change here in the Geography Department. And my interests are in drivers of environmental change and their impacts, particularly on aquatic systems. So that's mostly lakes.
One of my key sites is Lake Baikal in Central Asia, southern Siberia. And it's the biggest lake in the world. 75% of the species there are found nowhere else in the world, so it really is an important biodiversity hotspot. But this lake freezes over every year, and our research is now showing that it's being affected by global warming. And how do we know? So for example, part of my research involves going to these lakes, and we take these sort of sediment coaters and we get the mud from the bottom of the lake, we take it up, and I look at the microscopic plants called algae.
So one of the things that are in them are these things I've been looking at today called diatoms. So these are these microscopic algae, which you can see here in this book. And they're really useful because they say something about past conditions. So I use them to tell me something about things like climate change, about pollution, about inputs of nutrients, eutrophication, for example.
We can reconstruct what past climate is like by looking at the fossils in the lake mud. And the deeper down the lake mud you go, then the further back in time we go.
But we do similar sort of projects in Antarctica, Greenland, in Europe. We take the students out to Hampstead Heath, take sediment cores, and we look at these kind of things down the microscope in the lab downstairs.
And that all feeds into, it's all very much linked in a sort of geographical context of things like legislation and policy, whether our systems are stable, if they're impacted, and then sort of help to inform those policies going into the future.
So as you can see, in geography, research involves different approaches to understanding people's relationship to their environment. And when I say environment, it can mean a number of things. It can be the urban, social, cultural, physical environment. And how we go about undertaking research questions ranges across the discipline of geography. Some researchers conduct in-depth qualitative interviews and live in a place to understand local practices. Others carry out research that requires specific kinds of measurements and lab work. It can involve grasping the cultural meaning of artistic expression, or thinking about how to represent large data sets so people can see patterns between local events and global processes. And underlying any of this work is a concern and commitment for issues related to social justice. I've given you a taste of some of the research that goes on at UCL Geography, but there is so much more. And I really hope you feel inspired.